First Presbyterian Church of Amarillo, Texas has a rich and storied history of God's faithfulness. The Lord has used our church to help make disciples of Jesus for many, many generations. It all began on September 28, 1890, when 13 pioneers met and became charter members of the First Presbyterian Church in Amarillo. We were the fourth church in town. The first church building in Amarillo was constructed in 1889, known as Parker Chapel because George Parker donated the lumber to build the chapel, and he held the key. While Parker was Methodist, he graciously allowed this new Presbyterian church to worship in his chapel until we could construct our own building. By 1892, the Presbyterians in Amarillo had built their own church building. By God's grace and providence, we quickly outgrew our first church building, and in 1909, another building was built. Once again, this new church building proved to be inadequate for our growing congregation. So in 1926, the cornerstone of our current sanctuary was laid. Providentially, our new sanctuary was completed just a few years before the Great Depression. While the Dust Bowl struck the Texas Panhandle, decimating the economy, it did not break the resilient faith of our church, as God gave us the faith to persevere. By God's grace, our church grew rapidly in the next decade, as we grew to over 1,700 members by 1940, as we sought to be a light of God's love to our growing city. At the recent encouragement of our denomination's Synod Executive, Dana Allen, our session began a year-long process of praying, discussing, and determining 10-year goals for First Presbyterian Church as we seek to reach the next generation for the kingdom of Christ. Guided by the words of Jesus in the Great Commission to make disciples of all nations, we are committed to growing First Pres to over 1,200 disciples in the next 10 years, representing the diversity of the greater Amarillo area. While many churches may focus on membership numbers, we know that a disciple is more than just a church member. We know from Luke 9 that disciples of Jesus love Jesus so much that they are willing to deny themselves as they faithfully seek to follow Jesus every day in gratitude for His great love. These 1,200 disciples will be made not just within the walls of our building at 11th and Harrison, but as a part of a greater denominational strategy to plant and revitalize at least 10 churches and micro-expressions within the Texas Panhandle. One of these new micro-expressions has already begun to meet at our mission house, better known as Murray's House on 6th Street in the heart of the San Jacinto neighborhood.
We've discovered what happens when you show up in a community, you develop relationships, make connections, and share the love of Christ. That's why we want to plant or revitalize at least 10 churches or micro-expressions throughout the area.
One of the best ways to build those relationships is through a shared meal and conversation. Every Sunday, we have Sunday suppers here at Murray's House on 6th Street. It's an opportunity for us to invite the community in to share a meal, great conversation, but more than that, it's an opportunity for them to hear the gospel of Jesus Christ that can transform lives. We also recognize what Psalm 127 says, unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain those who build it. That's why we're also committed to activating 20 prayer groups in targeted areas around Amarillo.
Within the next 10 years, we envision growing 20 prayer groups in targeted neighborhoods throughout the city.
Yeah, so the idea is that in those prayer groups, we'll have people 3 to 5 in each home that would meet once a week, and they pray for an hour, not to do visiting or eating, but just praying for God's kingdom to come, His will to be done. And it'll give the prayer coverage to the church and to the ministries our church is involved with, as well as for the rest of the churches in Amarillo. We really desire to see the kingdom of God grow in Amarillo.
Our God has been so faithful to bless and guide the ministries of First Pres as we have sought to make disciples of Jesus through every generation in Amarillo, Texas.
As we look ahead to the next 10 years, we are excited to see how the Lord is going to lead us to make disciples of Jesus who can make disciples of Jesus. As we look at the ministry of Jesus, we can see that Jesus made disciples through Christ-centered, grace-filled communities. So as we seek to discover and live the way of Christ, we have a vision to build Christ-centered, grace-filled communities that God can use to transform our city, the Texas Panhandle, and ultimately the world.
I hope you'll join us in this exciting adventure.